What's good, YouTube? It's Jibril here, live on Twitch at the moment. And today we are going to be doing a small discussion on the next best deck in the TCG, Ryzeal, coming out this December, right in time for YCS Anaheim. So I'm live here with Twitch Chat. Twitch Chat, say hi to YouTube. And so I just wanted to go over the cards, talk a little bit on my first thoughts about the deck, and the potential format that we're going to be going into in the next coming months. So a little bit of background on the archetype. Ryzeal is a rank 4 spam deck. As you can see, the entire extra deck is all Xyz monsters except for one Donner, which we'll talk about soon. And right now it's currently dominating the OCG. And by dominating, I mean that representation wise, it's having well near 50% of topping deck list being Ryzeal. However, from what I understand, and there's a great video, I know Josh did a reaction on it, and I saw it talking about from the perspective of an OCG player, and obviously he said don't take his word from it, he's just one player, but from his perspective and from a lot of other players in the OCG, Ryzeal is not a tier 0 deck. It does have an incredible amount of representation, but from what I understand from the OCG side of things, it is a quite healthy deck, and the reason why it has so much representation is because of its ability to be piloted by anybody. This is the type of deck that it's a Sword Soul Kashtira type deck that a person who's just really getting into the game can probably spend a lot of money, because this deck will probably be expensive, and they'll be able to do well in the competitive scene just because of how simple the cards are to understand and how linear your plays actually are. And obviously by looking at the deck list, the amount of non-engine you're able to play in a deck like this. So let's go over the cards one by one, and then we'll talk after that. So the first card is X Ryzeal. So all the Ryzeals, half of them are Fire Thunders, and the other half are Light Pyros. And then the extra deck monsters, I believe, are the same thing. But so for X Ryzeal, you can special summon it from your hand by sending an Xyz monster from your extra deck to your graveyard. This is an inherent summon, so it does not start a chain, and I'll explain why that's really broken soon. But none of the Ryzeal monsters effects the summon from hand start chains. They're all inherent summons, so you can't respond to them with monster negation in order to stop them from getting on the board. These monsters will be able to get onto the board, and then you have to kind of deal with them after they're on the board. They're similar to Sprite in that manner. So this one is able to special summon itself from the hand by sending a Xyz monster from your extra deck to the graveyard, and then if you special summon it, that way you're locked into rank 4 monsters for the rest of you're locked into rank 4 monsters for the rest of the turn. So that's kind of the restriction on these cards, that when you do summon them from the hand using their great hand effects to get themselves onto the board, you lock yourself into rank 4 monsters for the rest of the turn. And this is very important. I think Konami kind of learned their lesson from past Xyz decks that became very good, like Zodiac, especially after the release of a card like AA Zeus, where Xyz decks, they kind of just wanted to spam the board and push and then summon like a 6 material Zeus, just get as many Xyz material onto Zeus as possible, and then just basically play Zeus control. So Konami didn't want this deck to do that. Konami wanted this deck to be rank 4 centric, which I think was a great design idea on them, because these cards are very good at putting themselves on the board and going into boards going second, because you're able to just spam the board going second. So in a world where these cards didn't have that restriction, and you were just able to summon an undestructible Xyz monster, or summon a Baguska, an attack that can't be targeted, crash into something, and then summon a 4 material Zeus, and then Zeus the board twice, and then continue to spam the board after, that would be it would be a very different story about this deck if this deck didn't have that restriction. But to continue with the cards, when X Ryzeal is normal or special summoned, and you do not control any monsters other than rank 4 or level 4 monsters, you can add one level 4 Thunder monster from your deck to your hand. You can only activate that effect once per turn, or you can only use that effect once per turn. So this card searches for the other half of your monsters, which are the Fire Thunder monsters. He searches those cards, and he's able to summon himself onto the board. The next one is your other Light Pyro monster, which is your main normal summon, being Ice Ryzeal. Ice Ryzeal says you can special summon this card from your hand by sending one other card from your hand or field to your graveyard, and then it locks you into rank 4s if you do that. And then its primary effect is if this card is normal summoned, you can special summon a Ryzeal monster from your deck except for itself. So on normal summon, he summons anybody else from your deck. We've already seen Ryzeal, X Ryzeal, so if you go normal summon Ice, special summon X, X will then search for one of your 2 Fire, Thunder Ryzeal monsters. There's another Ryzeal monster that we can talk about very quickly, but this card is unanimously understood to be bad, which is Palmer Ryzeal. We don't really have to talk about this card. Well, it's kind of like the Sprite Pixie of the Ryzeal archetype, so we really don't have to talk about it. The next card is Thode Ryzeal. Thode Ryzeal says if you have a Ryzeal monster in your field or in your graveyard, you can special summon this card from your hand, locks you into rank 4s for the rest of the turn. And it says if this card is normal summoned or special summoned, add 1 light pyro monster from your deck to your hand. So you can kind of see why this is kind of getting a little bit crazy. So X Ryzeal adds Fire Thunders, and Thode Ryzeal adds light pyro monsters. So Thode searches for these 2, and X Ryzeal searches for these 2. And then Ice can get you to either side in order to start a chain of searches and summons. So basically, if you have access to any one of these 3 Ryzeal monsters, you have access to all 4 Ryzeal monsters, which is very, very good. And the last Ryzeal, which is a one of, is Node Ryzeal, which says if you have an Xyz monster in your field or in your graveyard, you can special summon this card from your hand. And if you do, you're locked into rank 4s for the rest of the turn. And then its secondary effect says you can send 1 card from your hand or field to the graveyard to target a Ryzeal monster in your graveyard, special summon it in defense, but negate its effects. So this is kind of the extender of the deck, or that's crazy to say because they're all extenders. But this one is a primary extender. It's not really a starter card. It's mainly just here in order to allow you to get more bodies on the board. So that's it for the Ryzeal monsters of the deck, just 10 Ryzeal monsters. The deck is very, very consistent because, like I said, once you have access to one, you have access to all. Then we can talk about the other supporting Ryzeal cards before we just talk, because the rest is generic. They're just cards that we all know. 2 copies of Ryzeal Cross. Some lists play 2 in the main and side, a third for when you're going first. That is an option that you can try. Some lists play 1, but because I'm playing Desires, I'm playing 2. And there's honestly an argument to play 3 because you don't want this card to be banished. This card is a very good card. It's a part of your end board. It's an interruption, and it gives you follow-up. So this card reads, you cannot Xyz summon monsters with the same name as cards you control. You can target 2 Ryzeal cards in your graveyard except for Ryzeal Cross. Place them on the bottom of your deck in any order, then draw 1 card. You can only use this effect of Ryzeal Cross once per turn. So again, it's just recovering your resources. You play 10 Ryzeal names. Ryzeal Cross is needed. It's kind of like Rescue Ace HQ, where it's just putting back your resources, letting your grind game continue to go, and is giving you a draw, which is really good. And a second effect, which is insanely broken, says once per turn, when your opponent activates a monster effect, when your opponent's activated monster effect resolves, detach 1 Xyz material from a Ryzeal Xyz you control, negate the effect. So this is a monster negate on legs. It doesn't activate. It just detaches from one of your Ryzeal Xyz monsters. And the reason why this card is extremely broken is because there is no chain, because it negates the effect on resolution. There is no chain blocking to stop your opponent from negating a card with Ryzeal Cross. Say for instance, I don't know what's a good example. Say for instance you have I can't think of a good example. Say for instance you have like a Bestial Druid Worm plus a monster that triggers when it's sent to the graveyard. That's the best I can think of right now. And you link them both away for a the Dark Charmer. And you go Chainlink 1, your monster effect, in order to search because it was sent to the graveyard. Chainlink 2, Druid Worm. The way that Ryzeal Cross works is that the chain would resolve. Druid Worm would send an Xyz monster. So for this, let's just assume you have 2 Xyz monsters. Thank you, Kyle, for the follow. So Druid Worm would send one of your Xyz monsters, and then when your other monster goes to resolve to search, Ryzeal Cross would detach to negate it. So it negates it on resolution, so you can't chain block to stop Ryzeal Cross from negating whatever you want to negate. It's a guaranteed monster negate on whatever you want to negate, which is insanely good. The next card is Ryzeal Plugin. Plugin says target an Xyz monster or Ryzeal monster in your graveyard or banishment. Special summon it and attach one Ryzeal card from your deck to one rank 4 monster you control as material. Also, you cannot declare attacks for the rest of the turn except with rank 4 Xyz monsters. You can only activate one plugin once per turn. So plugin is a reborn for any Ryzeal or any Xyz monster, which is crazy. So all of your generic rank 4s, you can revive them with the Ryzeal plugin and give them an Xyz material, which is really, really nice. And it attaches a Ryzeal card from your deck, which is relevant for certain combos to play around cards like Ultimate Slayer, Book of Eclipse that we can talk about at another time. And then the last Ryzeal main deck card is Ryzeal Hole Thruster. Pause. But the card says target face-up card your opponent controls up to the number of Ryzeal Xyz monsters you control. Destroy them. Then you can attach one Ryzeal monster or Ryzeal card from your graveyard to one rank 4 you control as Xyz material. The second effect says you can banish this card from your graveyard immediately after this effect resolves. Xyz summon using monsters you control, including a Ryzeal monster. You can only use each effect of Hole Thruster once per turn. So this card is really good. It's basically just a Raigeki break or a blackout for newer players. It's basically a Sorcerer blackout. And the second effect in the graveyard is very relevant. It helps you play around cards like Ultimate Slayer. It also helps you. Some people play Rafflesia to help protect you from Impermanent Dual Drive, which is another card we'll talk about right now, pretty much. But it's just a good one of. It's a card that's searchable in the deck, and I'll show you guys why it's searchable in a moment. So for the first of the two Ryzeal Xyz monsters, we have Ryzeal Dual Drive, which takes 2+ level 4 monsters. And it says for each material attached to this card, monsters you control gain 100 attack and monsters your opponent controls lose 100 attack. You can only use each of the following effects of Ryzeal Dual Drive once per turn. It says if this card is special summoned, attach one Ryzeal monster from your graveyard to it as material. The secondary effect says during your main phase, you can detach 2 materials from monsters you control, so it doesn't have to be from itself. It's kind of like Gigantic Sprite in that sense. It also doesn't detach for cost. That is important. So the card is weak to cards like Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit. And it says if you do, add 2 Ryzeal cards with different names from your deck to your hand. So yeah, this card is amazing. Generic rank 4 that just adds 2 Ryzeal cards from your deck to your hand. What more could you want? It also makes your monsters, it's also a buff and makes your opponent lose attack points, which is relevant. Little effects like that become relevant because people forget that they exist, and you can get small little advantages from people forgetting, oh well, all your monsters are losing 200 attack and you wanted to crash something and your monster was 100 over, you know what I mean. Like little effects like those matter, and it's good things for you as the Ryzeal player to remember. And the last Ryzeal monster, which is the card on the box to represent this archetype, and rightfully so, is Ryzeal Detonator. And it takes 2+ level 4 Ryzeal monsters, so it's not generic like Dual Drive. And it says when your opponent activates a card or effect, quick effect, you can detach one material from this card to target a card on the field, destroy it. You can only use each of the following effects of Ryzeal Detonator once per turn. So the first effect is not once per turn, and it's not once per chain. So every time your opponent activates a card or effect, you detach an Xyz material to destroy a card. And yeah, so it's a Trident, but 2024-2025 version. Not once per turn, not once per chain, and it's on a big monster instead of Trident, which was a puny monster. The second effect says, if this card is special summoned, you can attach one monster from your graveyard to it as Xyz material. So on summon, it gives you, if you just use 2 level 4s, it'll give you a third material, giving you 3 pops. And then the last effect says, if an Xyz monster you control would be destroyed by battle or card effect, you can detach one Xyz material from this card instead. So it is also protection for itself and other Xyz monsters. So this is just a very well-rounded, very good card. It's just a very good Yu-Gi-Oh card. And you can kind of see why this deck is seeing so much play in the OCG. It just has a very good disruption boss monster that protects itself. It's pretty simple to understand. Just every time your opponent does something, you pop a card. It's very simple, very consistent, lots of recursion. All your cards pretty much do the same thing because they all get you to each other. So it isn't anything other than dual drive, which is a choke point, but there are ways to play around it. None of the main deck monsters really give you a great choke point to hand trap. And even if you get hand trapped, if you have 2 Ryzeals on the board, all right, just slap them together, turn it into a detonator, and you just have hand traps plus detonator. And that's a lot. And that's a lot against a lot of decks, you know. Just one card being 2 to 3 disruptions by itself at base is just very good, you know. The rest of the extra deck is just generic rank 4s that the deck plays. The deck is primarily locked into rank 4s, so you just play the best rank 4s. Utility, like Floodgate rank 4s. Dugaris is important for some of your end boards. Like a lot of the combos in the OCG, you're just ending on Detonator and drawing 2 cards with Dugaris to try to dig for hand traps. Excitonite is a card that's helping you go second, clearing boards. Same thing with Light Dragon, Agnister, and Tornado Dragon, just removal. Full Armored Utopic Ray Lancer is a card to help you OTK, because you can see that sometimes it might be hard to OTK because you're not really link climbing, you're locked into rank 4s. Like, how do you really like attack for game? This card can be summoned over any rank 4 by sending a spell from your hand to the graveyard, and then you transfer all the materials from that monster onto this monster, and all your opponent's monsters lose 500 attack, and it can attack all of your opponent's monsters that are in attack position. So this card is very, very, very good. This card is very, very good. For the last Xyz, we do play 1 copy of Zeus. You are locked into rank 4s a lot of the times, but there are certain setups where you could summon Zeus. For instance, if you get stopped and you're able to make a Baguska, say you don't want to make a Detonator, you don't think it's good enough like by itself, and you want to flood them with Baguska. That's kind of important in the mirror match sometimes, because sometimes just ending on Detonator and they summon a bunch of little guys, you don't really want to do that. You'd rather make a Baguska and try to flood them, because they're locked into rank 4s also, so they don't have a really good way of outing Baguska with a lot of setups. So you can end on Baguska and then start your turn off by switching it to attacking, making Zeusing, and then playing with rank 4s in main phase 2. And then the last card is Donner. So Donner is your 1 link monster in order to help you in certain situations, in order to clear monsters. It's just an additional piece of utility. It's a little bit better than a card like SP, because SP you would have to already have an Xyz monster. Donner, you can just use 1 of your Pyros plus 1 of your Thunders to go into Donner and out a card. That is also true. One of my somebody in chat just said with Hole Thruster you can make Zeus in your opponent's battle phase. That is something I forgot about. Because Hole Thruster lets you Xyz summon using 1 of your Ryzeal XYZs, or 1 Ryzeal monster you control. But for this situation, it'd be 1 of your Ryzeal XYZs. So you can summon Zeus on the opponent's turn. That is true, because if they attack into 1 of your Xyzs, or 1 of their Xyzs attack, you can just rank up 1 of your Xyzs into Zeus during their battle phase, because you're no longer locked. Thank you for reminding me of that. That is also a big deal. As for the main deck, we play 3 copies of Bonfire. Shockers, half of our guys are Pyros, so it's just 3 more consistency cards. 2 copies of Potted Desires. All of our cards do the same thing. We're playing a lot of hand traps. We don't care about banishing 10. The only cards that we care about banishing are cards like Node and the 1-ofs, but a lot of the times, unless you have to start with Desires, Desires is the last card you're using. You're able to thin your deck of all the important 1-of cards before you use Desires. 3 copies of Crossout. Crossout is just good to stop your opponent's hand traps, because in the mirror matches is going to be a hand trap war. So we want to be able to stop our opponent's hand traps. Crossout also is kind of like a imperm in this deck, because you're able to cross out their engine cards, which can help you sometimes when you have a weaker board. The side deck, don't really worry about that. It doesn't really matter too much. But that is just a very general look into the Ryzeal deck. If you guys like videos like these, definitely make sure to subscribe to the channel, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.